Good morning, Doug. Today we're going to talk about this amazing $1.9 trillion spending bill that's about to be passed by the Senate. We don't know its exact form, but based upon what we can see today, we're going to be commenting on some of the items in there and some of the implications of it. And Doug, you had a chance to read through some of the summaries of this bill. What stands out to you?
It is truly unbelievable. I mean, I was just flummoxed. It's this bill is going to make multimillionaires, maybe billionaires, out of Nigerian scam artists who I'm sure are going through this thing, or what looks like it's going to be, with a fine-tooth comb, figuring out how they can get as much as they can from it. This is like a direct aid bill to the criminal classes, not just of the US, but the world. Because when you got $1.9 trillion that's going to be passed out like helicopter money, because that's really what it is. I mean, these guys that are pros are going to position themselves to get as much as they can. This is going to be the scandal of the ages. It's going through this. We'll have to go through some of these numbers here. There's so many things. All of them are just off the wall. But to start with, let me mention, the numbers are hard to come by for what World War II cost, but most people don't have any idea. And part of it, of course, is the fact that, the value of the dollar has, the dollar has disintegrated since the time of World War II. But, and estimates vary, but it's about 275 billion of their current dollars. I mean, who knows exactly how much? I mean, but this is the biggest thing in world history previously. I mean, you know how expensive, the expense of blowing stuff up and thousands of planes and millions of men and 275 billion. They say, well, that's only like 4.1 trillion today. Okay, I mean, it's the numbers are insane for this, for COVID, which is basically a big zero, a big hysteria, Yep. I mean, this is criminality on painted with the broadest brush possible.
Yeah, but it's but as we talked about yesterday in that survey, Americans broadly are in favor of this kind of action by the government at this point. Republican, Democrat, Independent, made no difference.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. They're all for it. So this is further evidence of how completely corrupt our society has become. And it's across the board. Doesn't matter if you're heartland or coastal, Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter. I mean, they just want the money. I mean, it's funny money. It's going to destroy them. It's wow. This is going to be so entertaining to watch from outside the country. I've got to say, because it's going to get ugly in the next few years. But this is just amazing. I can't. Anyway, we can go through some of these things. I mean,
some of the highlights.
But going through just the highlights. In the summaries, I said, wait a minute, just listing all of these, just listing the most stupid things is going to take an hour. Forget about discussing. I mean, the size of this thing, it actually beggars the imagination. I've got a good imagination, but this is out. They finally crossed the line where things are completely out of control, because there's no way possible for certainly something as incompetent as the US government to distribute this much money to so many places effectively. Well, it doesn't matter if it's effective or not. I mean, it's all wasted and mishelp. Well, anyway, we can start with whatever. What do you think would be a good place to start?
You know, the big focus that seems to make all the headlines, because this is what, you know, the public is kind of clamoring for, is this, what was a $2,000 you know, payment to everybody, but is now $1,400. Like that's the headline. That's the thing that everybody's definitely in support of. I mean, broadly, not, of course, not everybody, but broadly Americans are in support of this idea. And so that's part of it. And they did add some means testing part of it, so that to make sure that, you know, people who earn a living of a reasonable wage anyway, basically don't get it, but everyone's getting it essentially. And so I think that's the headline. They're using this to sell all the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, one thing that you picked out, very obscure point, I mean, the dollar number is too small to be listed in most summaries, is $480 million for Native American language preservation and maintenance. Yeah, that kind of figures. That ought to be in any kind of a proper stimulus bill.
Well, relief. I mean, you know, those languages have suffered disproportionately under COVID, as you know.
Exactly. And, you know, this harks back to the disasters at Wounded Knee and places like that. So, yeah, yeah, this is very understandable. That's got to be like a minimum number, I'm sure.
Okay, actually, I found something really related to that I didn't share with you yet, but it is definitely connected to this tribal stuff. So they changed originally in the House bill, they had a formula for this. A huge portion of this bill is bailing out states and local governments. A huge portion of this bill is that. And they changed the formula from focusing on population to focused on unemployment rate. And so then that redirected funds from, you know, states that maybe didn't behave as badly during all of this, like Florida, because they didn't close everything. Their unemployment rate isn't so high, and yet they're very populous, to other places. And you know, it's a big shift to a lot of Democrat power centers, of course. But one of the most interesting one is the largest, you know, state and local bailout recipient is California, no surprise. After that is Texas, no surprise, huge state. Then New York, again, not a big surprise. But after that, with $20 billion, tribal governments.
Wow.
Ahead of Florida, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, New Jersey.
Wow. Those chiefs in charge of the tribal councils are going to be buying new Cadillacs.
Why?
This is like a subsidy program for the local Cadillac dealer. I mean, you may not recall this, but when I was a kid, it was kind of a running joke about how Indians that had oil discovered on their land would run out and buy a Cadillac. And in those days, the dealer would typically give you a full tank of gas. And what these people would do, I mean, it was a laughingstock scandal in those days, is drive the car until it ran out of gas and leave it parked by the side of the road, because they didn't really know what to do at that point. So, yeah, that's what's going to happen. $20 billion to Indians.
How many are there? I mean, I don't even know what the Native American population is, you know, that's in these governable areas either. How many could it possibly be?
I think it's pretty diluted. I mean, look, I hope Elizabeth Warren gets her share, but no, this is quite something. But 480 million for preservation of these languages. You know, if you want to preserve a language, nothing wrong with that. I mean, for academic interest, but this is what you know, universities and anthropologists that, you know, are on university payrolls. That's what they do because they're interested. You don't need $400 million of, or you know, the local tribal elders try to do this. You don't need $480 million. This is all a payoff. It's all a scam, you know, where some, you know, it's favors being repaid that'll be traded back and forth. Anyway, this is, and then there's $130 billion for school reopening. I don't know. Why does it cost $130 billion to reopen the schools? I'm not talking building new schools, hiring new teachers, reopening. They say it's to put in new ventilation systems, and it's all a scam. you know, but that's only 130 billion, and that's just for school reopening. Then 39 billion for childcare. Well, wait a minute, I thought that schools were childcare. I mean, parents, where both parents have to work, which most American families, you do have to have two working adults. I thought school was kind of childcare. So, but here's 39 billion more.
You know what they've been doing, Doug, and this was some articles on this several months back, but schools that were closed reopened not with teachers, but with childcare providers in the school, and parents could take their kids to the school in some cases and leave them there at a cost for these childcare providers to watch their kids, because the teacher, and in the school that they weren't allowed to go to normally while the teachers were not there. So, I think it's probably for this whole other set of people essentially that are, that have been kind of filling these childcare roles, the role that the teachers typically had in a lot of these places.
God, we're going to have a full employment economy. Where are you going to find all the people to hang around like that? I mean, we may have to clean out the jails and prisons in order to, find people to take care of the kids. Let me see, what else was there here? Well, then there's something for healthcare, which will pay up to 85% of certain people's premiums for their insurance. And of course, they always say healthcare in these bills, but as I think we've talked about in the past, healthcare is not something that anybody can provide for you. All an outside source can do is give you medical care. If you break a leg or if you catch tuberculosis or something like that, that's medical care. But that doesn't sound good. Nobody likes the idea of doctors and hospitals and operations and things like that. So we call it health care because we all want health, but health care is strictly an individual thing. It's diet, it's exercise, it's keeping your bad habits under control, but they call it health care. So anyway, this is many billions more to pay these premiums. And the whole idea of insurance has been corrupted. I mean, if, somebody else pays your premium, you don't care what anything costs. I mean, it's.
And we're not even talking about what you say. So what we're talking about here is actually more abstract than healthcare. So it's not healthcare. It's not medical care either. It's insurance for medical care. So we're not even paying for people for their actual medical care in this. It's all for this long ongoing insurance regime that is, it's paid for. I conflate insurance with care all the time. And that has always bothered me, that people don't understand that insurance is not at all medical care.
No, it's buildings full of bureaucrats shuffling papers, deciding how much, insurance should be absolutely limited in anybody's life, quite frankly. It's never a good deal. So what else do they have here? Well, they've got something to pay people's utility bills, whether they're in apartments or houses, billions of dollars for that. Because if you don't pay the utility bills, either you freeze to death or a utility company goes bankrupt. So of course they'll print up money for that. Here's 30 billion for public transport.
Which will
work public transport because the public transport usage has collapsed. So I'm not sure where that money's going to go.
Well,
other than salaries of workers, ex-workers. I don't know.
Right.
It's so. Then there's something, an undefined amount for pension bailouts of companies and unions that have not been working much. So, okay.
Well, these pension funds have been underfunded for, decades, and basically we're just topping them up. The taxpayers just topping them up.
Well, and here's an interesting thought. The stock and especially bond markets are at all-time highs. Why are pension funds still in severe deficit with their assets at hyper levels. God forbid we have a bear market. Then they're going to be really underfunded. Anyway, just a thought. And then here's another one. Here's the COVID stuff. Here's part of the COVID stuff. $50 billion to detect, trace, and monitor COVID. Now, it's not buying vaccines for people, which is another question, but $50 billion to detect, trace, and monitor COVID. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of money.
Well, and it's pretty frightening because that's, I don't really want more surveillance personally. I'm just really not interested in that, but that's essentially what this would amount to. And I shared with you this cute little animated video from LA County School District, I guess it was a few days ago, that had, talked about how, kids telling them on having this app that would, that they would report their symptoms every day, and, that they would get like magic, they would get their pass that they could print, and then they could enter the school with a guy with a thermometer, like a gun pointing at the kid's head, and the kid's happy they get to rejoin. And it's all, of course, built by Microsoft, just funny enough. But this video is part of these expenses, I'm sure, like tools like this for tracking and monitoring people all the time.
Maybe you can link to that somehow.
I will link to that. It's definitely worth seeing if you haven't seen it already.
Well, maybe it's to buy ankle bracelets for everybody so that we can be extra sure that nobody's getting out of control. So anyway, at this point, I figured, wait a minute, I can't write all this stuff down. This is just too amazing. Oh God, there's stuff for veterans, they're throwing money at that, and oversight and funding to state and local governments. $200 billion goes to states that are in trouble. I guess this is to kind of counteract the fact that some of these states, because their taxes are no longer deductible against federal taxes, it's approximately doubled the effective amount that people have to pay, mostly in the Democratic states. So here's $200 billion that are going to be distributed to people like Gavin Newsom in California and de Blasio in New York City, that I guess it's their discretion to pass out. So that's kind of neat.
Well, and don't forget the 20 billion for tribal governments, I think, is also in there as well. And
can't forget that. I don't know how many Indians we have in the country there. I understand the numbers. We have about 500,000 full-blooded Indians left in the country. So let's see, 20 billion. If we had 20 million Indians in the country, which we don't, that'd be $1,000 for each of them. 2 million, that would be $10,000. Sounds like about $20,000 or $30,000 for each full-blooded Indian.
I'm sure the check is forthcoming.
It is, and it doesn't mean much to Elizabeth Warren. She's got lots of money. Maybe she'll toss her money back into the pot. So anyway.
One of the things that I saw that I thought was really interesting was this unemployment part. Because one of the things, what it seems to me, there's a big change to try and move things to a version of this, what do they call it, universal basic income. But it does feel like it's happening, but it's happening in a way that's much more covert, I guess. It's not obvious where everybody gets it, but it certainly is happening. And I say this because the biggest piece of, we've been focusing on these checks that Americans are being issued directly to Americans, but it seems to me the unemployment, the additional bonus unemployment benefit that the feds have been paying, originally under Trump and will continue here apparently under Biden, is just gigantic. And it really does dwarf these one-time payments that are being sent out. And in this bill, so I think the urgency behind getting this bill passed really has to do with that. And as people originally were receiving $600 bonus a week from the federal government, in addition to what they received for state unemployment before, It got knocked down to $300. But again, that's in addition to what they get from the state. And then in this bill, it's increasing again to $400 a week. So $400 a week in addition to what they, their state unemployment. And when I looked at the math on it, maybe there's something I'm missing, but it's $350 billion. It's an extension for 24 weeks, and it's $400 a week. By my math, that means there are 36.5 million recipients of this. And maybe I'm missing something. Did you have any thoughts on what's missing there?
I think you're right, actually, because the unemployment numbers are the definitions of what constitutes unemployment, where people that haven't been discouraged workers are left out. All right, well, discouraged workers, you don't count them in the numbers. So the percentage of the population that's actually working at this point is actually at an all-time low. But you can't trust these government numbers anymore in the United States, not much more than you can trust the government numbers in Argentina, which are all notoriously phonied up to look good or look bad, depending on what the necessity of the moment is. So I think we have a lot more people unemployed sitting around, watching HBO at home than seems to be the case.
And that are collecting these benefits, because I looked at these BLS statistics, and for January, they showed that the unemployment, the number of unemployed was, based upon their household survey criteria they use, was a little over 10 million. But this is 36 million. I mean, it's like, I almost think I'm doing something wrong in my math, or maybe there's something else in there that's not easily explained. But that's a huge number of people on the dole that they're anticipating being on the dole then all the way through August, another 24 weeks, and are probably earning, many of them, more not working than they earned working, because of that $400 is just part of it. They also earn, in most states, it's like 2/3 of your average weekly wage is what the states pay. 2/3 of your average weekly wage.
And I guess this money that's coming into them is tax-free, at least for the moment, as well. So they've got more income. They're not paying taxes on it. And they've got time on their hands, which is partially accounts for, millions of people opening up Robinhood accounts. They've got the money and the time to gamble in the market. Kind of adds up to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the thing that seems like it's leaning toward this UBI idea is the child tax credit scheme that's been in existence for a while. If you have a kid and you're below a certain income level, then you get $2,000 for a child, each year from the government. So that's been that way. But it looks like what they're trying to do is they're trying to increase it to $3,000, and if the child is under 6, to $3,600. And what they want to do is they want to, rather than have that be a tax year thing, they want to have a check go out every month for that. So you're getting $250 a month essentially for every kid you have. So that's UBI based. It does feel like we're moving toward that in at least these two programs.
It does. And then another thing that's noted in here is that the so-called SNAP program, they don't call it food stamps anymore, is going to be raised 15% across the board. So a little here, a little there. And I see that there's $5 billion in assistance to help communities provide shelter to the homeless, $5 billion. I guess we could do the math and figure out how many homeless are there, but it's basically all going to go to places like Seattle and San Francisco and, places where you have lots of bums out on the street. So of course the administrative costs and slippage will take at least half of that. But what are they going to do? Are they going to put them up in hotel rooms of bankrupt hotels? That's a possibility. Or buy them more tents so they can camp out in better style on the sidewalks.
Actually, where this money really goes, Doug, is there was a Wall Street Journal article on this about 3 years ago that I saw that was talking about some efforts being done in San Francisco to address the homeless population. Now, there are, besides the efforts that are done by individuals and charities or whatever that are raising money, on the public side alone, they were spending $96,000 per homeless person per year and providing services to them.
Wow.
$96,000. Now, so this is the charity scam we were talking about a couple of days ago. There are all these agencies and third-party vendors that are basically set up to provide services, and it's all just, there's the homeless population only grows. Why? Because these organizations only benefit the bigger the problem, the more the problem is. And I'm not, maybe the people who started them and even the people who work in them actually really do care about the problem, but the game's being run on them too. It's so this is where that money really goes. It goes to support these agencies, my guess, or these nonprofits that, claim to be aiding the homeless population. They're useful idiots in this, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and of course, then there's talking about the so-called homeless. They used to be known as bums, but there's $25 billion towards emergency assistance to renters as well. I wonder how that's going to get disseminated. I mean, I'm thinking as if I'm a scam artist trying to capitalize on this $2 trillion that's coming out here. And I'm sure these guys sit down and they figure out exactly, they know the forms that have to be filled out, and they know how the game is played. They know where packets of cash have to be passed. So I'm sure there's gonna be all kinds of phonied up receipts sent into the program for rent that wasn't paid. The possibilities for fraud here are just absolutely endless, and they will be capitalized on it. There's no question about it. But 25 billion for rental bailout, and everybody approves of it. I mean, the landlords are going to approve of that, because otherwise they're going to be left hanging for the money. And everybody likes it. It's free. It's free stuff. Free for the landlord, free for the renter. Hey,
what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? So anyway, but the best is yet to come, because the Democrats are talking about another $2 trillion stimulus program after this one. So it's clear that the modern monetary theory, which basically says, don't worry about inflation or don't worry about anything, it's all going to be just fine if you print up money and spend it the right way, intelligently, the way we're going to spend it. But this is just the start. I mean, this would seem to be a grand climax, but it's actually just the start. So
I can imagine it won't be long before we see a spending bill that adds a zero to this.
Right. And actually, once you get up to $1 trillion, I mean, I guess I could dig out my Zimbabwe $100 trillion note. But frankly, once you get above $1 billion, you really have to stop and count the zeros. I mean, one by one, because it's, I mean, look, let's think as if we're primitive people, because we're being treated that way. When they count, it's 2, 3, many. So now we're more sophisticated. We have addition and subtraction and multiplication and such. But when you get into these trillions, the numbers become literally meaningless. Literally, they become astronomical, which they're meaningless. Yeah, so my question is, when are they going to roll back the dollar? And when are we going to have a new dollar that equals, say, 10 or 100 of the old dollars, just so things are not as comical? We don't look too much like a third world country, which have all these zeros on their currencies.
Well, I think that'll be in the introduction of the central bank digital currency, which they're certainly prepping for at this point. I think that's what will happen.
Yeah, that'll make it easy. It'll make it easy. It'll make it so much easier to, to get funds to the people that deserve it.
Right, and make sure that people who don't, are, can only spend it on things that are approved.
And you know what? Nobody is talking about this anywhere I mean, nobody seems to be scandalized. I mean, I haven't read anything where somebody's in the editorial is scandalized by how stupid this. They just talk about technical issues, as opposed to the principle in back of this.
Yeah.
It's actually all over at this point. I mean, in fact, the Chinese will not have to. One good thing is we may not actually have World War III with the Chinese. It won't be a hot war because, you know, the Chinese were running things very problematically. It's a whole different story, but they're not being this stupid. And they'll just conquer the country economically, like they bought Smithfield Hams, the largest hog producer in the country, a while back. So now all these people are working for Chinese, and there'll be a lot more Chinese emigrating, and you know, it's they'll buy everything in the U.S. with all this money that we're printing. A lot of it's going to be exported. So yeah.
Yeah, it might not. Well, I guess that's the upside, is that we might not have to have that hot war that seemed inevitable at some points. But
yeah, I mean, really, why have a hot war if you can get what you want just by kind of walking in and taking it? I mean, Americans are such whip dogs. They're so stupid at this point. The evidence being their reaction to all this stuff.
Well, and I just want to talk about one more thing, at least from this bill, that has to do with the, you know, this is thinking of our system today as much more like we're moving to something that's much more like a feudal system. It feels to me something like that, whether you have this oligarchy, and you know, and you see evidence of this all the time when you see how one class is treated from another class, and whatever class you think you're in, you're probably not actually. You're in the feudal class. And if you have any doubts who's in the other class, it's not Democrats or Republicans, it's the state and those that are associated with the state. And so you see, while Americans are clamoring for this $1,400 check from the government, they inserted into this bill a special consideration for the needs of the federal workers, because of course, you know, these federal workers have had a difficult time recently with the coronavirus. And
yes.
So, you know, one of the things is like I don't know if people knows, but a lot of schools have been shut down. So it's been difficult for the parents, the parents who are federal employees who have kids, you know, to take care of their kids, because their kids aren't getting childcare from school anymore. So now in this bill, it saves a day. If you're a federal employee, you can take 15 weeks of paid leave at $1,400 a week for any COVID approved reason. Which includes, of course, that if your child is learning virtually and needs additional assistance from you, you know, while you're there, or they're just not comfortable going to school, then you can get this $1,400 a week.
That is such a smart idea. I mean, yeah, I'm so glad that we have these people that are figuring this stuff out for us. I never would have thought of that, but if I was a federal employee, I would be all over it. That's just wonderful.
Exactly.
It's fantastic.
But remember, plebs, it's not for you. You know, it's not for you.
Yeah, no soup for you. Exactly. Well, got to put this all in perspective. I mean, 100 years from now, and 100 years is not that long, actually. Really, when you think of the average person living, say, 80 years old. So 100 years isn't all that long, but 100 years from now, this is just going to be something that came and went, just like America itself will have been something that came and then went. I've been watching a series on TV called Altered Carbon. Have you seen that?
I have seen that. Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of like a combination of William Gibson's Neuromancer, Blade Runner, and kind of like post-apocalyptic fiction, where the upper classes are all like multi-trillionaires and living with advanced technology, and all. It's pretty good. What do you think?
I like it too. I can't think of the lead actor in that, but I like him a lot. I think he's very good.
Yeah, he's pretty good. But I guess the thing is that it's set, I believe, like 250 years in the future. So life will go on. And you gotta keep this disaster we're going through now, which is going to get much worse, in perspective, because the future will be better for some people, and we'll have different disasters in the future. So
That's right.
it's all just a passing parade that don't get too worked up about this stuff. Just try not to be too adversely affected by it in the meantime.
Right. And I think that the thing is, you have to realize how hilarious all of this really is. Like, I mean, it really is the boldness of the double standards, I keep repeating that the powers that be are trying to tell you that they hate you. And people watching this might be getting it, but most people really they can't even get the message. And so they just keep elevating it. It's like, no, people don't, we hate you. See, look at what we're doing. And I mean, it's amusing actually how absurd it is and how ridiculous this all is. And there are things I do think that people can do. I mean, they don't involve the abstract. They don't involve arguing with people over ideas. They don't involve, in my mind, getting into arguments with people about masks or whatever sideshow arguments or race issues, whatever they're trying to get us drawn into to divide people. But there are so none of the solutions are there, but there are solutions, I think, in like actually working to improve your lot in the world by trying to create value and shaping a world around you that is as resilient as possible, and can take some blows from whatever comes.
Yeah, but those words are lost on the average American. The average American's kind of in the position of, the bottom of the barrel people in Dickens' Oliver Twist, where, some slop is being handed out and the kid says, "Please, sir, may I have more?" Mm-hmm. That's kind of like the average American's response to what the government is doing. "Please, sir, may I have more?"
So sad, but I think you're right. But that's not what we're talking to. We're talking to the others. So
yeah,
the people we're trying to help.
Yeah, we are. Maybe. Okay.
All right. Well, is there anything else you wanted to add to this stimulus bill talk?
No, it's just, once again, I'm absolutely overwhelmed by the size of this and the opportunity for criminal misfeasance and malfeasance. We're over the edge right now. So,
I know I had one question for you.
The roller coaster car is headed downhill in earnest with this bill.
And does that mean that do you think that this will be the catalyst that really starts to expose retail level inflation?
There's an excellent chance. Yeah, I really think this is going to put it over the edge. But I hope it's not for a while still. Frankly, listen, I'd rather have artificial good times than real bad times. So let's put off the bad times a little bit longer, okay? Let's clink our champagne glasses and get drunk at the party before the armored Percherons come in, ridden by the 4 horsemen that are going to cut everybody down. Yeah, sure. Let the party go on longer. That's better.
I agree. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. And tomorrow we'll do Q&A. So if you want to submit questions, join our Telegram channel. The link for that is in the description of this video. So join the Telegram channel. It's free, but you'll be able to send messages or send questions directly there. I will consolidate them all, share them with Doug, and we will discuss them tomorrow. So thanks a lot, Doug. I appreciate it. Talk tomorrow.
Thanks, Matt. See you then.